for as long as I've served on the Labor, Commerce, Research, and Economic Development Committee. So, and this is a concern that predates me coming in the 125th legislature when I was first elected to the House. What we know now is that Maine has a drug crisis. We have a really, really dangerous drug crisis. What we also know is that the vast majority of employers in this state, including hospitals, where people have access to controlled substances, where people in a neighboring state have died because of the actions of someone who was addicted to drugs and using needles, and then using needles, the same needles on patients, infecting those patients in New Hampshire. That was about 10 years ago. This is a crisis. This is another, LD 1384 is another piece of the puzzle to solving our drug crisis. We all knew when we came in after the summer and the fall that we were going to be looking at a lot of different legislation to deal with the drug crisis in the state of Maine. And this is an important piece of the puzzle. So let me walk you through the differences between the minority and the majority report. The minority report adds a new purpose statement and provisions which protect Maine workers from injuries and illnesses caused by impairment in the workplace. Not surprisingly, reports show an increase in the rate of positive test results for workplace drug testing among those very, 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 very small number of employers in the state of Maine that actually do drug testing. Okay? They're finding an increased number of people popping positive. And a lot of times they're surprised by those results because these may be employees who are good employees. These may be people that they don't want to have to find an excuse to fire. They want to be able to help them get treatment. And I would suggest that the time to identify people who need treatment and get them into treatment is before they reach a crisis in their life and they've been fired from their job, before they've lost their health insurance, okay? Let's identify them by training, as our report does, training supervisors to detect impairment, and then having a conversation with that employee and getting them to the point where they are willing to seek help and they can keep their jobs. Another thing that this amendment does is that it restores some of the protections for workers that can be drug tested already by employers who right now are exempt under Maine law. Why are they exempt? Because they are following the federal guidelines. So for example, right now under Maine law, if you have if you're an employer and you employ drivers who have to be tested under federal law, you're permitted to actually generalize that to all of your employees, which means they might not even realize that they're subject to drug testing, and all of a sudden, guess what? They are. And they're taken by surprise by that. This actually restores some protections because all employees would have to be notified of the fact that they may be drug tested, okay? It parallels the federal definition of MRO in that the MRO is required to be qualified with clinical experience in substance abuse disorders and substance testing. Okay, we're going back to, we want to be able to have a conversation with somebody that pops positive on a drug test. We want to be able to get them help. We have a workforce shortage in this state. We don't want to just have to be firing employees because they pop positive on a drug test. We want to be able to get them the help that they need while before their life has reached the crisis point. Again, this is a piece of the puzzle. It establishes the uniform impairment and substance use testing policies. Both of them do that, except that you wouldn't have impairment detection. okay? And yes, we heard, some concerns. Well, what if I've been up late with a baby and so you have the conversation. I've been up late with my baby, and your employer goes, oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, no one's going to be targeted if there are some understandable circumstances surrounding why they appear to be impaired. They might send you home, or they might take you off of a safety-sensitive task for the day, and I think that we would welcome that because, again, we don't want workers' safety to be at risk here in Maine. The other issue that we have, we've just all seen that it's likely now that we're going to see marijuana legalization coming onto the ballot in November, okay? So right now we already have medical marijuana. Part of the work group that developed the language in our amendment included the medical marijuana folks, the folks from the dispensaries, the folks who are interested in making sure that if you are legally permitted to use marijuana, that your rights have been protected, but that the employer also has the ability to say, yes, you might be entitled to use medical marijuana, but you can't use it on the job. And so what we know with marijuana testing is that it stays in your blood for a very, very long period of time, right? But if you're not appearing to be impaired, no one's ever going to flag you under our amendment, okay? It's all about detecting when someone is impaired on the job. It reduces the restriction on company-wide random drug testing to employers with 10 or more employees, as recent reports suggest that random drug testing may be an effective deterrent to workplace drug use. It's sort of the idea of, we've all heard, in fact, in other states I know that this is one of the ways that they keep people who've been convicted of drunk driving sober, is that they have these short-term goals, okay? Well, if you know that you could potentially be randomly drug tested, you're more likely to stay away from using that drug because you value holding on to your job. It's just another check. Again, this is a piece of the puzzle in the drug crisis in the state of Maine. I would ask you to support the pending motion and follow my light on this very, very important issue for Maine's businesses.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Maine.